I have done many unsolved disappearances videos on this channel, and they all leave me feeling the same way. How can someone simply disappear, never to be found again? It's a question that must be asked tirelessly by the families involved in such a devastating scenario. But the truth is, there are many of these unfortunate cases to talk of, and hopefully raise awareness about, because more and more people disappear every year under very strange circumstances, and new information is always being dug up from old cases that leaves many unanswered questions. So from a man who invented something that is most likely incorporated into your daily life, who simply vanished, to one of the strangest UFO-linked aviation mysteries in history, here are 5 of some of the most unusual disappearances, all of which are still very much unsolved. Before I begin, I would like to pay my respect to the families affected by these disappearances, and hope this video can in some way spread some much needed information out there. Rudolf Diesel. Chances are Rudolf Diesel has had a significant impact on your life. He created the worldwide used diesel engine, but had a tragic disappearance that is not widely known. Rudolf was born in Paris in 1858 and spent his childhood living in a variety of places before settling in Germany, where he studied engineering. Just after 1886, when Carl Benz invented the motor car, Rudolf developed an early version of the diesel engine, which earned him a small fortune. But then, all of a sudden, something very strange happened. On September the 29th, 1913, Diesel boarded a steamship in Belgium and was heading to England for a meeting with a consolidated diesel manufacturing company in London. That evening, he dined with fellow engineers George Carrels and Herr Luckmann, before retiring to his cabin at around 10 PM, requesting a wake-up call at around 6:15 AM the next morning. However, when the ship arrived in England, his cabin was empty, his bed had not been slept in, his night clothes were laid out ready, and his watch had been taken off. There was no sign of foul play, and his 2 colleagues confirmed he was in good spirits the last time they saw him, and had not been drinking. A detailed search of the ship revealed nothing, and it was assumed that Diesel, who had been known to suffer insomnia, had wandered on deck and fallen overboard. Some also suggested perhaps he committed suicide. A few weeks later, on October the 11th, 1913, the corpse of a man was seen floating in the North Sea near Norway by the crew of a Dutch boat. The body was in such an advanced state of decomposition that the crew did not bring it on board. Instead, they retrieved some personal belongings from the body and left it in the sea. These items were later identified by Diesel's son as most likely belonging to his father. However, there was skepticism over whether the body was Diesel's, as no positive identification could or has ever been made. It also emerged that Diesel was not the rich man he should have been at the time he disappeared, and had made some poor investment choices, leaving him on the verge of bankruptcy. This revelation started to add weight to the theory that he perhaps committed suicide, although no note was found and there was no indication to anyone who knew him that he was in a fragile state of mind. What later came out though, is that just before he left to board the boat, Diesel handed his wife a bag and told her not to open it until the following week. The bag contained 20,000 Deutschmarks along with financial documents that revealed how much debt he was in. In another eerie discovery, Diesel's diary was found, and he had penciled in a small cross next to the date of September the 29th, 1913, the date he disappeared from the boat. Conspiracy theorists later suggested Diesel was murdered by the German Secret Service because the diesel engine was so important in the development of U-boats that they didn't want his expertise shared with the British. It's also been speculated that rival inventors may have played a part in his disappearance, although none of these theories have ever been properly investigated. Balraj Rattu. 19-year-old Balraj Singh Rattu lived with his family in Surrey, British Columbia in Canada. After finishing his education, he started helping his taxi driver father on the weekends, driving a Royal City taxi cab. Then on November the 6th, 1995, Balraj asked his father if he could borrow his car to meet up with friends. At around 7 PM that evening, he was seen by a fellow taxi driver near an Indian grocery store on 138th Street and 72nd Avenue in Newton. He was said to be sat in the car with another young man, and they appeared to be drinking beer. He did not return home, and this eyewitness was the last person, other than the people involved in his disappearance, who saw him. The night after his disappearance, the Rattu family received a disturbing phone call at around 1:06 AM. Balraj's father claims it was the voice of a young woman. He said his voice and his son's are very similar, and whoever was on the phone must have thought they were talking to Balraj. The woman said, "Raj, you were beaten up, eh?" and then began laughing. The family were terrified, and at precisely the same time the following night, they received a second call from an older lady. Balraj's father said, like the previous call, the woman talked in Punjab, and she said very clearly that his son was not alive anymore. Unfortunately, the police were unable to trace the calls. Then, on the 9th of November, police found the car Balraj had been driving. It was completely burnt out and had been driven into the Veda Canal. Balraj's jacket, t-shirt, grey sweatshirt and jeans were found rolled up on the passenger seat, and the t-shirt was partially burnt. Further tests revealed a drop of blood on the sweatshirt was Balraj's. His family think he was murdered, and are certain the phone calls are linked to the crime. The question is, why was Balraj killed? Police confirmed he was not involved in drugs, gangs or any other criminal activity, and there is no reason as to why he was targeted. It's now over 20 years since Balraj disappeared, and the investigation is no further forward than it was the day he disappeared. His family say someone knows the truth, and the disappearance needs more publicity. If anyone has any information, or can shed any light on this enduring mystery, then this could seriously help end the family's years of agony. Felix Moncla. The case of Felix Moncla is an interesting one. He was a first lieutenant born in Louisiana on October 21st, 1926, who served in World War II during his enlistment in the US Army. After the war had ended, he went back to studying before re-enlisting in the military in 1950, where he trained as a pilot. By 1952, Moncla was a fully trained pilot, and just a year later, on the evening of November 23rd, 1953, ground radar operators based at Sault Ste. Marie in Michigan picked up an unidentified target near the Sioux Locks. An F-89C Scorpion jet piloted by Moncla, along with his radar operator, 2nd Lieutenant Robert L. Wilson, was scrambled from Kinross Air Base to investigate. Whilst up there, Wilson was having problems tracking the object using the onboard equipment, so Moncla took instructions from ground operators and followed the object over Lake Superior. He managed to catch up with it at around 8,000 feet, and the ground crew watched their radar as the aircraft and the object seemed to be getting closer and closer, before they appeared to merge as one. It was thought that Moncla must have flown his Scorpion either underneath or over the top of the object, and when they separated, they would appear as two again. But that did not happen, and there was the fear that the two had collided. Shortly after, all contact was lost with Moncla's aircraft. A search and rescue party was dispatched, and an extensive search was carried out, but no trace of the plane, Felix, Wilson, or the UFO were found. Initial reports in the Chicago Tribune stated the plane was followed by radar until it merged with an object 70 miles off Keweenaw Point in Upper Michigan. This statement was later denied, with officials saying the jet had not collided with anything. Instead, it was claimed the unidentified object was in fact a Canadian C-47 Skytrain that was travelling off course. However, some years later, the pilot of the Skytrain denied this was the case, saying that if it were his aircraft, it would not have been classified on the radar as unknown. Investigators also suggested that it was possible Moncla was suffering from vertigo and crashed into Lake Superior, although this was not included in the final conclusions made by the Accident Investigation Board. In another twist, it later emerged that Moncla's widow had mistakenly been visited twice by Air Force representatives to offer sympathy and explain what happened. On the first visit, she was told that her husband had flown too low while identifying the supposed Canadian airliner, and had crashed into the lake. But on the second visit, she asked if her husband's body would ever be recovered, and she was told there was no chance the jet had exploded at high altitude, destroying the plane and its occupants. An alternative explanation was proposed by UFO investigator Donald Kehoe in his 1955 book, The Flying Saucer Conspiracy. In the book, it's claimed the F-89 was hit by an extraterrestrial flying saucer. In 1968, aircraft parts were found near the eastern shore of Lake Superior, and Air Force officers confirmed the parts were from a military jet. It would seem the missing F-89 had finally been found. However, the find was never published, and the Canadian government has no record of it. In 2006, a report came out that two divers had found Moncla's plane at the bottom of Lake Superior. Two fuzzy images emerged, although experts dismissed the authenticity of these images, and the discovery was labelled as a hoax. To date, Moncla, Wilson, and the F-89C Scorpion remain undiscovered, and the circumstances surrounding their disappearance remains one of the strangest aviation and UFO mysteries out there. What's your theories? Bobby Dunbar. Now, this is a very unusual and sad case, which we can say would most definitely not happen these days. But back in the early 20th century, the technology was not available to prove the truth, which means the mysterious case of Bobby Dunbar is still unexplained. In August 1912, Leslie and Percy Dunbar of Opelousas, Louisiana, took their 4-year-old son Bobby out on a fishing trip in the Swayze Lake near their hometown, during which, sometime during the trip, the boy disappeared. After an 8-month nationwide search, authorities believed they had found the boy travelling through Mississippi with piano tuner William Cantwell Walters. But although there was a similarity between the two boys, William insisted that the boy was Charles Bruce Anderson, the illegitimate son of Julia Anderson, a woman who worked for his family, who he claimed gave him custody of the boy. The authorities did not believe his story and arrested him for kidnap, then asked the Dunbars to come to Mississippi to identify the boy they believed was Bobby Dunbar. Although they were not entirely certain, they identified him as their son by a scar on his foot and a mole. Reports at the time told differing reactions from the boy when he saw the Dunbars, with one stating he immediately knew his mother, while another said he just cried and was unable to recognise his younger brother Alonzo. The boy was returned to his supposed parents and received a welcome home parade when he returned. Despite Julie Anderson's protests that the boy was her son and attesting that Walters was telling the truth, he was still tried and convicted of kidnapping. The reason being, the Dunbars were far wealthier and well respected than Julie Anderson, and she did not have the money or the good name to stand any chance of claiming her son back. Julie Anderson eventually married and had 7 more children, but she often talked about Charles, the son the Dunbars took from her. William Walters appealed his sentence and after 2 years was released. He protested his innocence until death, believed to be in the late 1930s, and often wrote his thoughts down in letters. One of these read, "It seems that I must suffer now for an imaginary crime I did not commit." The boy claimed to be Bobby Dunbar, lived the rest of his life as such, and had 4 children of his own, before passing away in 1966. However, years after his death, one of his relatives began to investigate the events of his kidnapping, and after speaking to Julie Anderson's children and examining the evidence, she started to doubt the story. In 2004, after a reporter became interested in the abduction, the family agreed to DNA tests, and a comparison between Bobby's son and the son of Bobby's young brother Alonzo revealed that there was no blood relationship. The boy they had taken as their missing son was in fact, as William Cantwell Walters had strongly stated, not the real Bobby Dunbar. But because of this, the real Bobby Dunbar's whereabouts was never pursued further, and even to this day, his fate is still unknown. CO.AG. On April 15, 2007, 3 friends departed Airlie Beach aboard their catamaran. They were heading for Townsville on their first leg of their journey around northern to southern Australia. The 3 men were 56-year-old Derek Batten, his neighbour 69-year-old Peter Tunstead, and his 63-year-old brother James. They were all experienced sailors who had been sailing together since teenagers, and were all very well aware of navigation and boat safety. But just 3 days into their journey, a helicopter spotted a boat drifting near the Great Barrier Reef and reported a potential problem. After acting on this information, maritime authorities caught up with the vessel on the 20th of April and boarded it. It was the CO.AG, and what they found was very strange. The 3 men were missing, but everything else seemed normal. The yacht was in working order, and first impressions indicated the crew were on board. Food was on the table, a laptop was on, and the yacht's engine was still running. It was as if the 3 men had just vanished. The only sign that something may have been amiss was one of the sails was ripped, but apart from this, there were no other signs that the boat had been damaged or hit by a rogue wave. The police did not believe the men's disappearance was caused by foul play, and after several days called off the search, saying all 3 of them were probably swept overboard. Although the family of the men disagreed and vowed to continue the search as there were many things that did not add up. The men had a fishing line out, and the family argued they would not have put the line out if the weather was bad, and if it were, then they would have had their life jackets on. Their clothes were also found in neat piles on the rear deck, suggesting they may have gone for a swim, or were preparing to do so, something they wouldn't have done if the weather was anything but calm. The family also claimed the men were meticulous about safety and would not have taken any unnecessary risks, believing they must have been abducted and were still alive somewhere. The official investigation decided that everything was going to plan, and this was confirmed by a video recording filmed on James's phone. It showed Batten at the helm, Peter fishing, and a long white rope trailing off the back of the boat. The surrounding area in the video helped investigators pinpoint where the boat was. It also revealed that even though the sea was choppy, none of the men were wearing life jackets. It's thought that shortly after the video was shot, the situation changed, and this is when the crew pulled in the white rope. The fishing lure was found tangled in the rudder, and it was concluded one of the Tunstead brothers tried to free it and fell overboard. The other brother tried to save him and also fell in, and Batten, who was at the helm, started the motor and then went to drop the sail to go back and rescue his friends, when a deviation in the wind direction caused the boom to swing across the deck and knock Batten into the sea. The men would have perished quickly, as none of them were exceptional swimmers, and exhaustion plus the choppy seas would have pulled them under. The official report also ruled out foul play or a staged disappearance. The explanation seems very precise and leaves a lot of doubt and unanswered questions, especially for the family. So could there be some other more sinister explanation? Were these men abducted by a USO, a UFO, or something else like some have suggested? After all, why would they have prepared food to eat if they were out on deck wrestling with fishing lines? Why was their computer still on? And why would experienced sailors not put their life jackets on if the sea got exceptionally choppy? The fate of these men will probably never be known, and the case has been likened to that of the Mary Celeste, when 10 passengers and crew disappeared under similar circumstances. What's your thoughts on the CAS-2 disappearance? So that's 5 very strange disappearances that seem far from being solved. As always with these videos, I would love to hear your thoughts and theories, as they can make a bigger difference than you might think for those involved. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.